and gentlemen, welcome to the future. I'm Zach Gardner, the chief architect at Keyhole Software, and I've had the privilege of working with some really amazing mentors in my almost 20 years of doing software development. People along the way that have taken time out of their day to help me solve challenges, help me to think about things in ways that I perhaps wasn't thinking about. Maybe I was being a bit too myopic, and opening my eyes towards what are some of the potentials? What are some of the things that I need to be thinking about? And honestly, I felt like it was time that I give back, that I pay it forward, that I help other people who are in shoes that were very similar to mine. Maybe not size 13s, because maybe not everyone is 6'6" like me, but people that really want to advance in their careers. So I decided to go out. I scoured the four corners of the WWW, and I found a lot of people from a lot of different walks of life. Some are consultants, some are FTEs, some are CTOs, but I wanted to focus today on Kansas City companies because although it looks like I live in the future, I actually don't. I'm in Lenexa, Kansas currently. So with me today, from the product side, which is someone who I think this is a first for me. I've never interviewed someone from the product side, is Ann Steinhaus. She's the head of product at C2FO. Ann, how are things going?
Things are going pretty well. How about you, Zach?
Can't complain. I'm going to go see Inside Out 2 after we're done recording this. So this is in no way I'm not being reimbursed by Inside Out 2. If anything, I am paying them for the privilege of seeing my movie.
Yes, I have already seen it. My daughters have seen it. One of them has seen it twice. So yeah, there's a lot there.
Good. No, I'm really looking forward to it. And of course, all the views and opinions expressed in this program are the views and opinions of other participants and don't reflect their employers, don't reflect any trade organizations. They don't even reflect any movie theaters that they might be going to here in a few hours. We're just two people. We're just having a good time. So C2FO, started by Sandy Kemper, Kansas City company. It was actually like less than 200 feet from our old office when we were off state line. So I'm curious if you could talk first a little bit about you. What has your career path been like? What are some of the places that you have worked at? And then that should hopefully, kind of segue us into, kind of recommendations that you would have for others.
Sure. Yeah, I took a pretty circuitous route to get here, which I think a lot of your guests have. So I grew up on the East Coast in Massachusetts. I started out as a biochemistry major, which I really liked the subject matter, but wasn't super passionate about it. Wasn't sure what I was going to do with it. Thought I might go into medicine, and so I worked for a lab and worked in a lab for a year outside college, and I really didn't like it. So I was fortunate enough. A friend of mine had a job with a really small boutique research firm, and I was able to kind of take over her job when she left. And it was my first foray into data analysis, and it was kind of cool because I could use some of my science background. We were trying to analyze, potentially bad drug interactions based on prescription data. So it was kind of cool. Got introduced to statistical software packages like SPSS and SAS. It was just really interesting problems that I could, try to solve. From there, I got into marketing. A lot of what I was doing was using that same kind of data analysis bent. I worked for Digitas in Boston, which is a digital marketing agency, looking at mostly email campaigns. And a lot of what I was producing was just PowerPoint decks based on what I was doing, but really got to dive further into SAS, got introduced to SQL. So, I kind of geeked out on the data side of things for a little while. From there, worked for another agency. My husband is in medicine. He matched for his residency in San Francisco. So we moved out there. This was 2007. So, it was before all the Facebook millionaires and changes to that city. But it was a lot of fun being out there. Worked for another agency while I was there and really got introduced to a mentor who took me under his wing and he was basically my MBA program. So he taught me things like the 5 Ps of marketing, the Porter's 5 forces, things that I probably couldn't really recite today, how to do a SWOT analysis, all of that fun stuff. But it was a really fun sort of education. And so I got a lot out of that experience, just understanding how companies work, I also got to travel a lot, which I think just instilled in me sort of the feeling of like, you get your stuff done on your own time. You don't have to sort of be beholden to a 9 to 5 or 8 to 6 sort of schedule. So I kind of picked up a lot from my 4 years there. As part of this journey, my husband switched specialties and rematched in Boston. So moved back to the East Coast. And it was, I think, 2011 when I sort of said, hey, I'm not loving this. Like, I'm producing these strategy documents for clients. I can't really see what they're doing with those. I can't see the impact they're having on the company. I don't want what I own to just be sort of a PowerPoint deck at the end of the day, although I was really good at PowerPoint and I still pride myself on that. I got hooked up with a recruiter who introduced me to this idea of product management. And it sounded like it ticked all the boxes for me. I could use a lot of the skills that I had acquired, from having a solid foundation in understanding data, understanding how to work with businesses and clients, understanding end users, through my marketing experience. So landed at a startup. It was, I think, about 25 developers and me, and I was the only female there, which was also very sort of eye-opening. We did hire a female office manager as well, so I wasn't completely alone, but got really introduced to agile software development as well as startup culture. And it was a lot of fun. It was great feeling like, I was so much more hands-on. I got to really build things with and through other people. So that was a lot of fun. After maybe a year and a half there, we got acquired, and I was fortunate enough, I will say, to not be one of the people continuing because I wasn't really excited about sort of the future of what that company was going to do. And I thought, I'm going to take the summer off. I'm going to kind of just like explore, I had at that point, 10 years into my career, I really hadn't taken a break. Within 2 weeks, I had 2 job offers in front of me. So, the best laid plans, right? And really, it was kind of the first time where I felt like I was at a crossroads. I had interviewed with a sort of boutique customer research consulting company. That would have been, I think, a great job for me. It was, more traditional. I would have had a, pretty decent salary. And then the other option in front of me was I had been working with a friend of mine who was part of a really small early startup. There were 3 people, and they had just gotten into Techstars, and they said, "Hey, you want to come on this journey together and make very little money and and kind of go through a crazy experience?" And I was like, "Okay, well, I don't have kids yet. This is kind of, I think that probably the last opportunity I'm going to have like this." So I dove in. The Techstars experience was really great. It was pretty crazy. Being in my early 30s, I already felt like one of the older people there. That just, gave me a lot more feeling of ownership and, realizing that as a product person, yes, you are responsible for what engineers build, but like you're also responsible for the business. So it was a really great experience, but ultimately my heart wasn't really in it. So from there, I landed at TripAdvisor. That was, I think, where I really blossomed, I would say, as a product person. So I got to work on some really cool stuff, which maybe I didn't fully appreciate at the time, but looking back, it was just amazing. So I ultimately landed sort of in the search arena. So at the time, if you were to go on TripAdvisor and search for something like beachfront hotels, what you would get is a list of hotels with beachfront in the name. At that point, we had reached our 100 millionth review on the site. And we said, hey, don't you think there's some great content in these reviews that would be helpful to travelers? And so we basically built a search engine where people could search using that content from all of those reviews to serve up more relevant results. And, along with that came, okay, how do we index all of this stuff? Like, this is just a massive database. How do we index? How do we, store it? How do we deliver results quickly? So it was kind of a nice mix of, I got to focus on that end user experience, but also I had to know just enough to be dangerous to learn about how do we deliver that in a way that's actually meaningful and useful. We also, at the time, we're trying to enhance our mobile search experience, which has that added element of location now built in. So we had to know enough to say, okay, what's that right balance? If I'm, at the time there was a restaurant in Boston called Barcelona. So if I'm standing in Boston and I'm 200 feet away from this restaurant and I type in Barcelona, is it more likely that I'm looking for that restaurant, or is it more likely that I'm planning a trip to Spain, right? So it was really fun having being able to play around with those things, and then being able to do A/B tests that just you could get results within a week, right? You had millions of users hitting the site, and you could get things that were statistically significant really quickly. So that was a lot of fun. I ultimately, we moved to Kansas City. So my husband's from here. He somewhat reluctantly brought me back here, which, at that point our daughter was 2. And I think what ultimately convinced me was looking at the real estate here compared to Boston. So I was like, do we want to have a 5-bedroom house or a 2-bedroom basement condo? So moved here, and I was still working remotely before it was cool. I got an email one day from the chief product officer at this company called C2FO. And I didn't think much of it. He had previously worked at TripAdvisor, and kind of there was some connection there. But I looked and I looked where they were headquartered, and it was literally a half mile from my house. So I was like, okay, I'll go have coffee with this guy. And I brought all of my postal biases too, where, it's like, I've worked in Boston and New York and San Francisco, and like, that's where everything's happening. And I was just blown away by the people that I met here and the culture of the company. I think a lot of people pay lip service to transparency, but I saw it here. I was dying to get back to a sort of in-person environment and started here. So at the time, I think we're about 100, maybe a little over 100 people. We've more than quadrupled in that time. So it's been 7 years. I think I've gotten the privilege of sort of riding that wave and growing with the company. So I consider myself hugely lucky in that regard. But it's also, I've learned a ton. I think this is where I would say I've really grown as a leader more than anything. And now I'm sort of still problem solving, but it's just at a different level. So I needed all of that foundation of the things that I picked up kind of in those previous experiences, but now I get to learn new things and then take those skills that are just sort of second nature and use them day to day.
You definitely had a very interesting journey. I mean, talking about one of the interesting things that I've kind of noted is like having a background in data. Like you talked about, statistical significance and using SAS. I think that like one of the things that really excites me about technology is when I get to use it to solve actual problems and be able to model data in my head, understand just how to even ask some of the questions that I want to be able to ask. It's a really, really good and really, really effective way of like getting in your users' heads, is like trying to see it from their perspective. So I think that's probably part of the success, if I had to guess.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good point, because we see this, I see this, today with product managers. Like, one of the things is they'll say, hey, we need to measure this. And we have a business intelligence team, and they'll say, tell me X, right? But it's not phrased in such a way that's really getting at like, okay, how are you going to answer that question? You kind of have to do that. Like, okay, what is going to be the proxy metric that's going to tell you that thing? It takes a lot of skill to be able to understand like how data, what you can learn from data, because it can be used in really poor ways, as well as and for as many ways as it's helpful, it can also work against you.
Oh, for sure. And I think you actually hinted on one of the next things that I want to ask is, going from someone who does PowerPoints all day to working with, a group of 25, developers, now to, being the head of product. How has your day-to-day changed, and how has your relationship, like what you do at C2FO, changed as you've quadrupled?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, because I think, when I started at C2FO, I had a director title, but I didn't have direct reports, right? So it was just the nature of being a lot smaller at the time. And so I had to work to build trust with my engineering team, understand the business, understand the customers. And it was really cool where I got to start out. We were sort of building something a little bit from scratch. So it was a typical sort of product job, but like you still have to do those foundational things when you come in and sort of build that trust. So I think, as we've grown, I've taken on more responsibility. So both in sort of the domains that I'm overseeing, and then the people who report to me directly, or report to people who direct to me, or who report to me. And so I think, like, for me, I still have to build that trust. I have to understand customers. I have to understand the business and the stakeholders, who are around us. But I think I have to be more comfortable that I'm not going to know it 100%. I'm not going to be an expert in each of those areas. So I have to be able to recognize, when do I need to go deeper on this? When do I need to pull in one of my team members and hold them accountable to sort of going deeper on this? So, it's just a little bit of comfort with ambiguity and not being the expert, which is really tough for me. I don't know if you've ever done disc profiling. We've done that as an organization, and I'm a C, which means I am analytical. I like knowing all the facts. I might need time to sort of process and come back with a recommendation. It might mean I'm indecisive. And so for me, that's been the biggest part that I've had to get over as I've grown, is to say, I have to be comfortable that there is no right answer to this. And I'm going to make the best decision I can based on the information I have. And probably the most important thing is that, not that I want to make rash decisions, but that I make a decision and make it clear what that decision is. So I sometimes equate it to board games. So my husband and I have gotten really into board games. It started a little bit before COVID, but then kind of got accelerated through the pandemic. And a really well-designed strategy game is designed such that, like, there's no one path to success. And every kind of strategy you might try, there's always going to be a weakness to it. And so you're constantly just making these trade-off decisions. And so, and there's usually some element of luck. So, I just have to have that mindset, right? I'm making the best decision I can based on the strategy and the tack that I've chosen. I don't know what's going to come next, but I can try to sort of like think about what my next move might be.
Mm-hmm. I agree. We got into puzzles during it. So that's real fun. We did a 1,000-piece puzzle. Mistake. You can't go from 0 puzzle experience to 1,000. You got to work your way up. Kind of like what you were saying. Like, when you go into a new organization, you could be the most amazing product manager ever. You have to build that organizational trust. You have to get people behind you. It's the storming, norming, forming, performing model of software development. I've seen that play out so many times. One of the things that I was kind of noting, like jotting as you were talking, that I have struggled with too, and I think it's an underappreciated element of not being in the code every single day. How do you balance the desire to be hands-on to have a physical presence in there versus when you know if you do that, you're going to become myopic, you're going to not see the whole picture, but you know you have to delegate. Like, do you have any recommendations, any strategies that you use for that? Or is it kind of what you're talking about where it's like, you know what, I'm going to make the best decision with the information that I have. I'm just going to go for it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll be clear. Before I make that decision, I'm gathering a ton of information. But I think what I found, and maybe this is slightly off the exact question you're asking, but it reminds me of like there's authority and there's influence. And I have a lot of authority in my current role, which can go a long way. If I tell someone to do something, they're most likely going to do it. And sometimes people will come to me and be like, I'm having trouble getting this person to do this thing. Can you just make them do it? And I send an email and it gets done. But I think that that's not a long-term sustainable way to run a team. And I have to think about my influence. And I think the best way to influence someone is to get them to own the decision and own the decision making. So I might try a little bit of like Socratic method and say, hey, what do you think is the best way to solve this problem? I might, set up time to kind of do that with them. And I might have a solution in mind. But it's a little bit of like, I liken it to like Inception. I need to plant that seed in their brain and then make it their own idea. So, and I think, it's actually kind of cool because like what you have a couple of outcomes that can come from that. Number one is, okay, you work through the problem with them, they own the decision, they agree with you, and ultimately like they feel bought in, and now they're actually going to kind of be on board with it. Or they're going to push back and you're going to work on a better solution together, right? Which is like, I get so much joy out of that. I never feel like my answers are the best. I love sort of going into a room with someone and saying, okay, we're going to hash out this problem. How do we do it? And I get animated, we whiteboard, like it's so much fun when you have that trust that you can kind of debate and get to a better solution. So I try to always approach things through influence and not authority.
Mm-hmm. One of the mistakes I made early on too, and I didn't fully appreciate it. It goes along with influence versus authority. Sometimes your suggestions as a leader will come across as commands. And it's like, no, like, I just wanted to talk. And they're like, well, but you said that. Or it's Ann's idea. So, if it doesn't work, it's Ann's fault or it's Zach's fault. And it's like, no, like, I was trying to facilitate a discussion. It was not like, you must do this.
Yes.
I still probably keep making that mistake.
No, it happens a lot. And, it's funny because I realize like, I tell people, I don't care about titles. It's so easy for me to tell people that because I have the title, But it is like, we have to be really careful because that has happened a lot where it's like, so-and-so said this and therefore I must do it. And it's like, don't take me that literally, please.
Yeah. Take me seriously, not literally. That's what I always say. So kind of reflecting upon your career journey. I mean, I think I've definitely got the vibe that you prefer to be a generalist instead of a specialist, just kind of opening yourself up to opportunities. Do you have any recommendations for the people out there that are thinking about, kind of taking the next step in their career? If you had to do the whole journey over again, is there anything about it that you would change? Any recommendations you could give to, and from like, the early 2000s when there were much fewer Teslas riding around San Francisco?
I mean, I am, not to sound too corny about it, but like, I feel like I'm in the right place and the journey I had was the right one for me. So I try not to second guess too much, but I think looking back, man, there's a lot of things that I know now that I wish I had known earlier. I think I always assumed there were adults in the room making decisions, and that any contribution as a more junior employee that I might have, like, well, surely they've thought of that, or oh, they're not going to like that idea, like they're talking at a much higher strategic level. And I think as I've grown, and this isn't to disparage any of the companies I've worked at or people I work with, but it's like you start to learn actually, like, there isn't some 3D chess or like some higher level thinking. Like actually, some of those ideas that I had would have been great to contribute. And I think that's one of the things I love about C2FO is we do have this culture of, everyone being involved. And I want people, I want engineers to push back on product. I want product to push on engineers. Like we should all be working together to get to a better solution. And it doesn't, again, it's not dependent on title or who who's the best suited to kind of come up with an idea. So I would have sort of encouraged my earlier self to be more vocal earlier on. And I think in the same way when I see especially engineers, like the ones that sort of stand out to me are the ones that are pushing back and understanding, asking a lot of questions, making sure that they understand the business objectives and the customer objectives before they write a line of code. Right. And like, I think there's a lot of like feeling like, oh, but product said this is what we're going to build. They must be right. And I'm like, no, like you probably have a lot more information than I do. Like, please bring those things to the table.
Mm-hmm. And something we were talking about in the green room, totally outside of work, triathlons. I hear that you were interested in that. And I wonder, kind of talk to me about like what that experience is like. And do you think any of that has bled over into the discipline necessary to be a successful leader?
That's an interesting question. I hadn't necessarily made that connection with discipline, but I've been a runner for close to 20 years. I like running is kind of my meditation. Mm-hmm. I feel like it's how I sort of work out problems in my head. And about a year and a half ago, my older sister, said, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing a triathlon for my birthday. Do you want to join me?" So there are three of us, all sisters. We did one last November, and then we just did one in June, which was Escape from Alcatraz, which was so fun. And I think it's actually been kind of cool for me to branch out and realizing, maybe I'm taking a lesson from my career playbook, but it's like running, if you're doing the same thing day in, day out, like maybe not the best on your body. And so incorporating swimming and biking has been kind of an eye opener for me. Like I just feel better overall. But I think, it's something with all of those sports. There's a repetition to it. And I think I heard you previously talk about knitting, right? Like there's something meditative about the repetitive nature of it. I'm also a knitter, by the way. There's something about it that to me, it's more about the balance. I don't know that my discipline in the athletic arena necessarily translates one for one, to work. But it is something that I kind of need to balance things out because like I need that repetition. I need that sort of steadiness in my life because one of the things I love about my job is like no 2 days are the same. And so, but I also need to kind of balance that out with something that's more comforting and repetitive because it just kind of clears my mind.
Totally agree. Yeah. I haven't been knitting as much because I injured my thumb. Like Who would have guessed, like at a job where I have, a QWERTY keyboard and a mouse that, I'd have like an injury in my thumb. Like, whatever. It makes pressing the spacebar difficult, which you press spacebar all the time. I found out. So no, Ian, it was really nice to talk to you. Good to catch up again. Thank you so much for being on the program. And I look forward as the father of 2 girls for a world where there's more than just one woman at a tech company. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the time. It was great.
Yep. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll catch you in the future.